Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. This week we are reading The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. Since this is the first episode of 50/50 Books, I'd like to outline exactly how this podcast is going to work. So we split the books in half, read the first half. We'll let you know at the end of every episode just how far to read in order to listen to the next one. Since this is the very first episode, we'll let you know now that we read up to the end of part 2 of The Cartographers. So that's how far you would need to read to fully understand what we're going to talk about in this episode. And in the future, you'll just hear that bit at the end instead.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this one and you haven't read the book, pause this. You only got half a book to read to catch up, so easy peasy, and come on back.
It's about 7 hours of audiobook, if you're wondering.
Yeah, and if you've read the whole thing, you can still listen along and laugh at us for the ideas we come up with. That's the best part of this, I think. Although this one, I think I might have on lock. Just thinking, you know?
You know, I feel like that's a thought we have sometimes, though.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, you know what? This one seems straightforward, and then the second half of the book happens.
Yeah. Do we want to just jump right in then?
Yeah, I think first thing we can talk about is kind of, we could say why we chose this book, but more than anything, like what sort of things we might have known about the book ahead of time or things we may have heard about it. I don't think I had heard of this book until we decided to do it for the pod. Yeah,
I think I was the one that initially kind of found it. I, look at those Goodreads lists. I think it was on one of those. What grabbed me about this, though? I think I was just into maps at that time. I mean, I kind of am still into maps a little bit in like the most
I love maps.
Casual way possible. And also, did you know the genres before you started listening to the audiobook?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
Actually, what is it?
Do you know them now?
As?
Oh, okay.
I mean, I would call it a mystery.
Yeah, so I knew the genre as being like mystery, and I also knew it was magical realism.
Oh, I think I remember you mentioning that.
Yeah, which I usually really like as a genre, so I think that's also why it grabbed me a bit. Which I think definitely knowing the genre helped me out in reading the book, kind of figure out what was going on. Although with what we read up to, we obviously don't get, I guess we do get like confirmation at the very end, but I was able to piece things together a little bit sooner than that, I think.
I have to say I kind of like that I didn't know it was magical realism, because part of the story was me figuring out, like, is there a magical aspect to this, or do we just not know enough information?
Yeah. I'm sure that would have been a very fun experience to have.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a mystery, so there's plenty to sleuth out, even if you do know the magical part, which is great.
Right. There's always figuring out exactly like what the magic is, though. It seems like it might be simple here, but that's always a fun part of these books, is like when it kind of touches the fantasy a little bit, and you're like, how far has it gone, and what exactly is the structure of it? Yeah,
that's why I tend to like magical realism. Mm-hmm. So, do we want to talk broad strokes style of the book?
Yeah. Do you want to start with your initial thoughts there?
Yeah, I got like 30 pages in and was like, uh-oh, I'm a little worried. I think those were like my exact words in the group chat. Just because I tend to like indirect information and characterizations, I think. And everything in this book felt very direct. And sometimes it felt a bit like it was info dumping. Especially with Nell's flashback about the junk box incident, especially because later we figure out there's more to the incident that for some odd reason wasn't in the actual flashback. So I was just like, why is this happening?
Yeah, that kind of came off weird when she tells the whole story like she was the only one that suffered its consequences, and then was like, also Felix was there. And it kind of made her come off as like a bit self-centered, right? Like there was this whole other person's life who was affected by this event that you were like moping for, and I get it, like that was your dad that did that to you, but it was also your partner who you lost as a part of that. So it didn't set me off like on the right foot with Nell as a character.
Yeah. I will say, like, sometimes it bothered me a bit, but for the most part I got over it. Like, I was like, oh, this is just how this book is. And I think there is a benefit to that in this kind of book because it's a mystery. I was like, okay, so not everything has to be, like, so mysterious continuing on. Like, I don't think it would have worked either if the junk box incident was, like, held on to and dispersed in smaller bits. So I think what happened is fine for what's going on in the story, especially when you then tack on like the magic aspect, because that just adds like another layer
Yeah.
of mess to deal with. So having like a lot of information delivered very clearly and sometimes multiple times, I don't think it like is a negative in the story. It just took like me a minute to get used to it.
Yeah, I have to say I never mind when they give me information multiple times because I will miss it. So it's always helpful for me. But yeah, I would say I do like the directness overall, but it's particularly in these beginning portions where I kind of agree with you, where it's like maybe too much. And one of the threads I might have in talking about this book is there's portions of it that made me think of like fan fiction, and the reason I say that is in part because of the directness, but also like because of the delivery of it kind of gives the vibe of like everything here. There's two things that came to mind. One was everything was okay until it wasn't, and kind of like this like thing of like things like are unbelievable, or like they move too fast, or like there's just like they're so big. So like the argument that Nell and her father get into and things like that, you know, things we'll talk about more throughout, felt a little bit like, wow, like could this be a reasonable response to the things that are happening? Does this make sense? So yeah, the sort of delivery towards the beginning of the book wasn't appealing to me as like a storytelling style.
I don't know if I agree. Oddly enough, it sounds like a contradiction. I think, how do I want to say this? In regards to the pacing itself and like things seeming to happen very quickly, is that like what you're saying you had an issue with?
Yeah, that at least in part, yes.
Okay, I think it's kind of like a necessity in this book though, because I mentioned Nell at some point is like, oh, the map is the safest with me because nobody's going to suspect I have it. And I'm like, you're being an idiot. Like, even if you haven't talked to your father in 7 years, people are gonna suspect they have it if they're literally robbing and like breaking into one of the most famous libraries. Like, you will be on the list at some point. So, to expand the timeline would have created an issue with that. Like, people are after her. I think we kind of
Yeah.
set that up at the end, like where we ended. She literally gets knocked out or whatever. So I think things happening very quickly. And I will say in a way that, for the most part, doesn't stand out. Like, nothing feels too weird in regards to its pacing. Other than Felix, but he's a separate issue. We don't need to talk about him. Things are moving, I think, at a believable rate in regards to like looking things up, and like things feel very tense and like they need to happen this quickly, because I think they actually do, because she's actively being pursued.
Yeah, I'll say one, maybe the biggest example of this, so that I don't go too crazy with this, is when they're at the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the beginning anymore, but when they're at the funeral service and Irene is like, by the way, we're like gonna dedicate like this part of the library to your father, and the ceremony is in 2 days and I haven't told anyone yet. Like that part, I was like, okay, things are moving too fast. This doesn't feel super believable. And that's where I was, another point where I was like, yeah, like I've seen this before. You know, like I've seen this, like, oh, suddenly this thing is happening that we had no context or like hints at happening before, just this moment right now, just before it's going to happen in the story.
Right, but I think for that, they were already planning to have that event, weren't they?
I mean, they must have been if it was happening in 2 days, but the fact that they were like, we didn't tell anyone yet, you know, and we're not telling anyone until 2 days before it happened, I think is like the jarring part. And then it like would turn out to be like a very well attended event too.
That might be true. Like, I feel like that is something you kind of plan for months in advance, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, she does ask, she brings it up Nell brings it up, why so quick? Like, why is this turning around so quick? And Irene is like, well, we're just kind of worried, you know, like that it'll be suspicious if we wait any longer. But
well, maybe
that didn't feel like a sufficient explanation to me.
Yeah, maybe it's that the party was already planned, but the dedication was something added on.
Right, that's possible.
Yeah, because I mean, it could have been like a planned event that was happening very clearly, but the fact that part of it was for Dr. Young could have been either added on, or the plan to do something in his honor was in the background. And Nell is hearing about it because obviously it's, his daughter. So Irene would tell her that. That might explain the timeline for that a bit.
Yeah, I could believe that. And things do move pretty quickly when someone has passed away. So, like, I get that part too. Just, like, the fact that it's, like, a formal, like, this is a library event and not just we're having, like a in memoriam type thing. It's like it felt very formal and structured. That's all. I don't have anything else to say about that, though, for now. I will talk more about style stuff, I think, when we get to the Ramona chapter, because I have different thoughts when we get there.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're at, like, a slight disadvantage whenever we read something because we're taking notes when we read it and we're, like, looking deeply into things, which is fun.
Yes.
So fun. But also, that means we're going to find things to complain about a lot of the times.
Absolutely.
If you're just reading this in your pastime, it's kind of a banger. Like, already, it's a bit of a banger.
It did take me a while to, like, catch on, though, and I messaged our group chat to say, like, usually even good books, I'll find a point where I'm like a little bit bored right now, or like this isn't doing it for me. And even though I had, like, some qualms with the style at the beginning, like I mentioned, like, there was not really as much of that in this book. Like, I was definitely invested and, like, curious about where it was going and sort of what information we would and wouldn't be privy to, and also just, like, which part of it was the mystery. Like, is it the death that's the mystery? Like, is it the map that's the mystery? I kind of thought the map wasn't going to go anywhere for a bit, actually. So there was definitely a lot to grab on with this book.
Yeah, and I think we both made notes about the beginning of this mystery, but do we want to just hold that thought and actually talk about Nell as, like, a character?
We can do that.
Okay, so we have our main character, Helen Nell Young. She is a cartographer like her parents, thank God. I can't imagine what that relationship would have been like if she hated cartography.
Right.
Got in a fight with her father about maps and was banished from the cartography field, which I also have some thoughts about.
It just feels crazy to me.
That's crazy.
Like, I understand there's, like, he's very important and, like, a really well-renowned academic in the field, but I would think that anyone else who was involved with this situation would have been like, maybe they let some family drama come into the workplace and then kind of move on,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Swan was working. He was trying, but no, yeah, it's insane.
And, like, the fact that he takes Felix down to, like, it just, so I obviously have a lot of emotions related to this. But I understand that, like, we're gonna find out that, like, the map is super dangerous and, like, it maybe is the thing that killed his wife and, like, all this stuff, but, like, the communication is just so poor, and the fact that he's, like, able to convince Irene to fire them to over it, and then also Irene kind of just, like, acts like that isn't what happened. Not that she denies it, but she kind of just goes on like that she didn't fire Felix and Nell. So
yeah,
it just doesn't seem, like, realistic to me.
It's very much like Irene obviously understands having a Young in the library would benefit, because Nell is obviously very good at what she does, or she's supposed to be. I don't know if we've actually gotten that much cartography from her, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know why she's useful. That sounds so rude.
Oop.
I don't know why. I don't know why, like, Irene is so willing to give her a job back, especially after it's been 7 years and she's basically been banished from the, like, cartography as a whole. Like, that's crazy. Like, I guess
she hasn't been a functioning cartographer, something like it, even in that time.
Yeah, I guess it just speaks to, like, when you're in high academia like that, connections are everything.
Absolutely.
Like, if you have the name, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of like the 7 years didn't happen. Like, Nell mentions them a lot. She keeps mentioning, I haven't talked to my father in 7 years. But everybody is kind of acting like it hasn't been 7 years. Like, Irene's, even Swan a little bit, and especially Felix. It's like no time has passed for some reason. It's very strange.
Yeah, I think one part of that's particularly strange to me is, like, Nell's sort of personal relationship with her past father, like, changing kind of quickly from, like, he ruined my life, like, the whole reason I'm in my situation is because he did this whole thing to me and Felix. And then her motivation kind of seeming like it's about her father a little bit at least. And she mentions at some point in time, like, I want justice for him. Like, it's like the point of view seems to change really quickly. And so it doesn't even just feel like the 7 years didn't happen. It's like, did the argument happen or what? Like, what's our opinion of dad here?
Yeah, and I think obviously it kind of falls into, once we figure out what the map is, I think it obviously falls into that cliche of like the cruel parent who actually had a good reason.
Yes.
But
Goodness.
I fucking hate that cliche.
I do not like that at all.
Yeah,
It's like, sure, you could like have a reason to like not want your daughter to be around that map, but you could also just tell her the reason you don't want her to be around that map instead of doing all this crazy stuff where you ruin her life. Because really, if you thought the map was going to kill her, why'd you kill her career instead?
Yeah, it's yeah, I hate it. I'm assuming that is what's going to happen, and I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to be more upset when Nell is inevitably like, I love my dad for doing that thing for me.
I know. Yeah. I think speaking to motivation, though, I think that does tie into kind of how this mystery starts, if you think we're good with Nell. I mean, we're going to talk about her the whole time.
Talk about is that she works at Classic, but that'll probably come up when we talk about Humphrey, so.
Yeah, that's fine. She gets called into the library, obviously, because her dad just died. But nothing is odd about it. Like, he was in his 60s, and he died in his office. Seemed to fall and hit his head, I guess. His room is a mess, and she thinks that's strange, but Swan is like, actually, pretty normal. So that's not strange.
That made me really suspicious of Swan at first, by the way.
Oh my gosh. I think Swan's
I was like,
is
Swan lying straight to the cop's face right now? But I actually don't think that's true. I think he's just telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, certain people certainly think Swan is shady. I don't agree. But she finds a secret compartment with her mom's portfolio, right? Folio or portfolio? Is there a difference?
Portfolio.
Okay.
I don't think so.
her mom's thing that holds maps, and inside is the gas station map that was from the junk box incident. And she's like, she basically holds on to the map and is like, I don't understand why this is here. Something strange is going on. And
right.
the thing in my head, I was like, so he has the mom's he has his wife's folio, and he also has the map that destroyed his daughter's career through his own hands. Why could it not just be like sentimental reason? Like, I didn't understand why it was such a mystery as to why he still had this map.
Oof, I have some thoughts about that. Because I agree. At first, I was like, he's obviously just keeping it because he knows he screwed up and is too chicken to say something about it, so he just stares at this map instead, right? Like, that was the first thought. But there's a number of times throughout this book where I feel like Nell is really looking for something that she's lucky to find is there. Not like things that in a normal situation would not be there. And I think this is like the first time where that happens, where she's looking at the map like, oh, why is this here? Like, there must be a reason. There must be something bigger. But like in any normal story, there wouldn't have been. It would have just been the sentimental thing. So I'll definitely point out some other times where I think that's happening throughout too.
Yeah, I think some affordance can be given. I think if we think of it like almost a shock situation, like it has been 7 years, and she's kind of looking for answers. Like, why did he die? Why did he keep this map? Like, she wants there to be a mystery, and it just happens that there is one. Like, she got lucky in that situation.
I could almost see like this story is the story that Nell made for herself when she finds the map. So what I mean to say is, I theorize that this could be a book kind of living in Nell's head of, I found this map in my dad's desk. I think it's really important, and there's like a big deal, and there's like a reason why my dad died when we weren't expecting him to, and this is kind of the story she told herself. But in reality, what happens in the quote real world is he did just keep it for sentimental reasons. He was bad at communication, and that's that. Yeah, kind of like almost like it's all a dream.
That's crazy. That's kind of crazy.
I mean, I doubt this was the intention, but it's just
I don't think
I can imagine it. I can imagine it.
It would like fit, because then her ex-boyfriend comes back and like hooks up with her, and like she's meeting this secret society type of situation. Like, it is kind of dreamlike how everything happens.
Yeah, it'd be like a pretty crazy grief response, I think, but Maybe not that crazy, but
Yeah, but I think there is actually just like a mystery going on.
no,
And
yeah, for sure.
she just simply got lucky. Because the other thing about the gas station map is she notes the like compass rose. She notes like the compass rose and is like takes special attention towards the sea in the middle of it. And I was literally so confused because I was like,
Oh no.
is the C just for either a compass
For
rose
compass?
or is the C stand for cardinal because it's the cardinal directions? Like, I did not understand why it was so mysterious that there was this compass rose on a map and it had a C which could stand for either compass or cardinal. Like, I did not understand.
That really makes so much sense. I wish I had like 2 brain cells to think that same thing, because I was like, ooh, what is that?
No, oh god, I don't know.
I was upset that I didn't figure out that it was probably just for cartographers. Like, that was the easy answer. It took me until they told me.
Yeah, as soon as I knew the cartographers were a group, I was like, oh, they're probably gonna make it be for the cartographers, which I also have an issue with the cartographers as a group name.
Oof. Do we want to get into the? Maybe we should wait till we like talk about them in college.
We'll wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so next is basically Felix comes back into the picture to kind of help Swan out, but obviously, you know, him and Nell still have something going on. Felix, we've mentioned him, used to be Nell's ex. They were basically like what Nell's parents were. He was kind of the science side, she was kind of the art side a bit.
Right.
Which is a nice in theory, but I also kind of hate them together.
I don't think that they are a positive feedback loop.
Absolutely not.
They seem, yeah, like maybe they bring out the worst in each other, especially based on what happens towards the end of this section. But just the whole interaction that they have in their first reunion put a bad taste in my mouth. And like, I wasn't really liking Felix. I didn't really hate him at this point, though. I think later on I started to. But it just didn't feel like, wow, like this made a lot of sense that you guys got to this point where you weren't talking and broke up with each other. And I understand that Felix was reasonably upset that he kind of came down with Nell, but
and I don't even think it was reasonable.
Yeah, sure. It just didn't make sense to me that he would like then kind of redirect that towards her.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't at least first line up to me as like a reasonable response, though when you hear what Felix has to say to her during that last scene, maybe it does make sense for his character, but that just makes me like him even less. I don't mind that he like went off and worked for tech or whatever. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about the tech perspective in this book. That's fine, whatever, but just the way that he treated Nell, just like it put a bad taste in my mouth about him.
Right. I will preface this, or I guess it's not prefacing if we're already in the middle of the conversation. I don't tend to read romance, like straight romance especially. It's not really my genre, because I don't get this vibe of like the soulmates, you know, it's been 7 years, but everything is exactly the same. They're meant to be together type of situation. Like the fact that during the incident, Nell and her father were fighting, and then Felix stepped in, seemingly of his own accord.
Right.
And then ended up losing his job and being like blacklisted from cartography, which is fucking ridiculous, even still. Like, he made that choice himself. I don't think it's justifiable for him to direct that blame towards Nell when he didn't have to get involved. Like,
I totally agree.
I think this is a classic situation in which you obviously do not mix your personal and your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the risk he took, really.
Yeah. And so the fact that he like left that argument, packed up his things, and then left without like saying anything to her really fucking bothered me. Like, really bothered me.
Because it doesn't even feel like he actually cared to defend her at that point.
Right. I was like, what did she do during the argument? And when they met again, Nell notes like, oh, we were arguing again like we did before. And I'm like, you didn't argue. Like, you two did not argue.
Didn't talk.
You argued together against her father and then broke up. But the two of them were not angry at each other. Like, he just left himself. So I was so confused. But then immediately we're also getting lines about how she's still kind of interested in him, and like we're getting that from him as well. And it reads very typical romance, which could work for some people, but it doesn't work for me.
I think we're just missing something, really. Like, since we didn't get the older part of the relationship, we don't have anything to be invested in.
Yeah, I think it also just, in my head, Felix feels like a very tacked on character. And I think I feel this way partly because of how the flashback was treated. Like, we get the junk box incident the first time, and then Felix comes in, and we get, like, the abridged version of what actually happened with him there. Kind of, not really. It's not another flashback, but he was there, apparently. And he gets his own chapters, but really his purpose feels so much like it's just there to introduce the company he works for.
Mm-hmm. He feels a little, like, typical or, like, a little generic. Like, I get it. Like, he's there as a delivery service for other plot points, and he could be there, he could not be there. I don't think he's necessarily like and again, until the last argument that they have, I don't think he's necessarily like the worst addition to the book or anything, but he didn't feel like he was bringing a lot of his own personality to the table or like things for me to like about him specifically.
Right. I think him being in the book is for that delivery, and also for like there might even be like a scene of betrayal in the second half if we figure out the company he's working for is the one after the map.
That's interesting.
Which might be like a fracturing of their relationship even more. And then obviously he's also like the generic love interest, but I just don't like him right now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wonder if that's going to be the moment to talk about like the tech thing.
Yeah. The next thing that kind of happens in the book is we figure out what the map is worth.
Did they say like 100,000 or
something like that? I think somebody might be buying it for that much.
But they said it was worth more. Because when I first saw the 100,000, I was like, is that really enough if it's like the only copy of this thing that people clearly want?
Yeah, the first time it's kind of mentioned, somebody's seeking to buy it for like 100,000. And that's also kind of when we get the cartographers as a group brought up as like some ominous presence in the map world. But we at least seem to now understand the gravity of the situation and why, one, somebody might die for it, and two, why a library might get broken into.
Mm-hmm. It does seem almost like it's wrongly ascribed to the cartographers, because it really, I think we're getting the sense that this is one person who's responsible for this, or like a group that is not more than one person from the original cartographers, unless it's like Wally and Bear, which we can talk about later. But yeah, it seems like all we can figure out is there's a group named the Cartographers, and they're spooky, scary. We don't know who they are, so therefore we're going to ascribe it to them. But clearly, like, no one actually knows who they are because no one can figure it out.
Right, because even during the service, when when Nell is talking to the board members for the library, like, somebody's like, oh yeah, they're real, but another person is like, oh, I thought they were just like myth.
Yeah, I do think this is one of the points where there's like kind of like withheld information, kind of falsely or like unnecessarily withheld information, because Nell kind of goes through all the effort of like, who are the cartographers, and like talks to Swan, and Swan is like, yeah, I like vaguely heard about them maybe once like 30 years ago, like something like where it seems like it's not actually relevant. And it's like, it seems like they're actually like, it's not known who they are, but it seems like lots of people have actually heard of them. So it felt like a false obscurity.
Right. Yeah, it felt like it was just going to get brushed aside as if it wasn't a thing that actually existed. But on the flip side, the fact that it actually exists and some kind of name has been made from like 7 students in the field of cartography being called the Cartographers, crazy to me.
You'd also think that, they would just get like laughed off the stage kind of with that name.
Right. Like, I guess if what we know is accurate and they're the ones that quote unquote figured it out, then it makes sense why they might have some notoriety. But it's like, that's the name that gained traction though. Cartographers. Like, I can't get over it. I can't get over it.
Yeah. I'm going to hold my comment about them as PhD students. So, because I'll wait till the Romy chapter.
Okay. Okay. So before we get into the actual cartographers, I know we're taking a long time, but we're going through it all. We do get an actual chapter from Felix. We're back to Felix. We probably don't need to talk about this a lot, though.
Well, yeah, there's some things to talk about here that maybe aren't just like about Felix himself now.
Yeah, I think you mostly have those points.
Yeah, so this part, I don't think I realized it at first when I read this. It wasn't until later, but I think this part kind of starts to introduce the sort of like tech versus traditional back and forth kind of between like Nell and Felix, or just like the library and Haberson in general. It like brings in this, what I get frustrated. So I like work in tech, right? So I get kind of frustrated with this argument of like oh, like with tech there's like no need for libraries, right? Like, which I just see as a false dichotomy, you know. And so this kind of instinct from Nell, or like Dr. Young, the big Dr. Young, to be like tech bad. It's like, all right, like I do get the sense that Haberson is bad, don't get me wrong, but just with the instinct to be like, I work in a library and I touch real life maps, so therefore tech is bad. Like that kind of drives me crazy. So I think I'm not like super excited for that to be expanded upon in the second half of the book. There's plenty to be worried about when it comes to tech, and I just don't think this is it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, reading about tech like this in a fictional book when you work in tech is a little bit challenging sometimes, and maybe I can chalk it up to this is not really our universe, right? This is clearly like a parallel one, or one like ours per se, but the intro to this chapter where Felix is like with his little crew working at the Haberson company, whatever, and they're like running a simulation and they're like, let go of the variable. I was like, what does that mean? Like, I don't think, sometimes I think it's better to just stay a little higher level is all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to be mean, but it took me out of the story to read that, because I do this stuff, and like certainly AI stuff takes a long time to run. Like if you're like, oh, I'm going to test my program, it could be something that is going to take like 2 hours to go. And so that I can understand, but like sort of the visualization that they have, or like there's all these dots on the screen, and like we introduce like the little purple dot that like does a little dance, and then everything like seems unlikely is what I'm saying. And I'll give the author credit, because it's probably hard to like make this stuff seem like, if you tried to write the real thing, it probably wouldn't be interesting. And so I understand there's like an aspect of this that's like, let me like make it seem cool and interesting, and like that's certainly what like a movie would do with it, right? So I get that, but it's hard for me to read that part seriously.
Yeah, it brings into question like why that felt like a necessary bit to have. I guess because it's a type of mapping.
Yeah, I think that's the point, right? Is to be like, oh, it's the Haberson map. Like this company is centered around this AI map, which is like vaguely a map. And like, we're really like stretching the phrase map here. And also this map does everything. Like, so like a lot of stretches.
Yeah, but there was probably a way to do that in a not so like direct, filled out type of scenario. Especially because Felix then goes on to explain exactly like how he started at the company, and like how it went for him, and also what the company is, which was a lot of information.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe that like a version of Google where the only thing that mattered was its mapping ability is like the biggest tech company of this world.
Yeah. I'm not as into tech, so I kind of just glossed over when I read it all.
Which I imagine how most people do it. But for me, it's like the thing I'm like least on board for is the Haberson company. Like, as far as like a thing, I believe everything that is written about it. Like, I can like that is where it becomes hardest for me to suspend disbelief. It just seems like, and I don't want to say it seems the most unrealistic. There are like definitely things in the story, like I mentioned, that I find unrealistic. But just as like the sort of backdrop for this part of the story, especially the part of the story that I think is going to grow in the second half of the book, it makes me concerned that I'm not going to feel engaged by the Haberson company as like the enemy, or as like a big feature.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is kind of like Dr. Young kind of pushing back against the company getting involved at the library, and kind of setting tech up as not necessarily like the ultimate villain, but like harmful to the art of cartography, which seems to be a very big point in the story. It gets mentioned quite a bit.
Nell goes on about it. Nell's like, like turning like the strokes and images into like zeros and ones just like doesn't do the justice to the map. And it's like, I mean, I don't think that's the point. I mean, I don't know, I could be wrong, I could maybe be making assumptions. I don't think the point in the Haberson company coming in and taking scans of everything is so that way it can reproduce the exact like experience of analyzing a map. I mean, maybe like that's because there's another real reason why they want to scan all the maps, but that's another thing.
Yeah.
But like, I can't imagine that if this were like, let's say this was not exactly like a nefarious thing that was going on here. I could see a situation where a tech company offers the digitization of resources in that library, like maps, and it would make total sense because it makes that resource so much more available to people. Not everyone needs to have the map in hand to get what they need out of it, or for any like piece of paper that the library has for that matter. So I would think, tell me if I'm wrong, I would think as a librarian in the modern time that you would be super stoked by the opportunity to digitize things, not because it should replace the thing, but because it will make that thing more accessible.
And now this is kind of entering into my field a little bit.
Yes, I would like to hear.
As somebody who like works in that environment in which things are becoming very digital, I think there's an interesting quote that's been coming up a lot during certain meetings, which is like, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly what they say, but it's basically like a library is about access, not preservation.
Right.
Like the point isn't to keep absolutely every book that's ever been published. We do have like our special collections in our archives, and there are some things that are important in the form they're in. I think for maps and certain art that holds true, because it's not just about what is on like the page, but also like the material it's made out of and like how it was made and like how it's deteriorating. Like for books made out of animals or even books made out of humans, it's very important that those types of things are preserved because it speaks to like that process.
Right, there's kind of an art aspect you're retaining.
Right, but in regards to like the actual information on it, like I don't need the physical book to read the book. And I think there's been studies done about retaining information being better when you're reading a physical book versus reading like an e-version of a book. Right. I don't know if that's bullshit. I think one of my professors did a study on that when I was in one of his classes. So there could be something to that there. But also, space is limited, right? Like you can't hold on to everything. So I think scanning the maps and holding on to some information of them is fine. I don't see an issue with the company doing this, especially if they're tagging the maps to help prevent against theft. I think that makes sense. I think they already do that with like certain art anyway.
That makes sense, yeah. That part actually threw me off. I was like, you're going to put something on the map? Like that seems bold. Even if it is micro.
I mean, yeah, because then you're like, but the thing, there's also like an interesting, there's like an interesting YouTuber I watch who kind of plays a little bit into archaeology, and it's kind of like you can preserve things as best you can, but also history is always happening. So there is kind of a benefit to what we do to things. So like, is there a historical benefit to something micro being added to an ancient map? Like what will that speak to when somebody looks back at it in the future? Yeah. Like that's an important part of history and how we developed or how we chose to develop. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that either. I don't know. That's just my opinion though.
Yeah, I see that. I hadn't thought about it that way before, honestly. And I'm sure like worse things happen to maps like that by accident. So, so I can see that. Yeah, for me, it comes down to, sure, keep the maps around, right? Like if you in the map division need the maps in person there for you and you have the space for them, hold on to them. But that shouldn't stop you from the digitizing aspect. Right. Assuming that's what they're doing. I mean, the other thing is too, like there's like a security aspect, and I couldn't really tell like what the exact services Haberson was providing to the library were.
It's basically everything, let's be honest. Yeah. They do everything.
Like, because it sounded like they talked about like digitization, they talked about security, like I couldn't understand what was going on there. Though it's also interesting that this would be happening when Irene is like the library is falling apart. And it seems like the idea of the story is, well, like the Haberson company is going to come and replace the library, you know?
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
know.
there is like the privatization of libraries, like companies buying libraries. That is a thing that happens. The fact that I don't really know much about the New York Public Library, but it like failing seems crazy, but I guess it's a possibility with
Seems
how
highly
libraries.
unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely.
Every other branch of the New York Public Library would have to close before that one was in trouble.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, yeah. I think another way to look at it is you have, which might be a bit more understandable because I feel like I don't know if I spoke very well in regards to the field I'm in, but for Broadway, for example, there's always the debate of if it should be like digitized and like shared and slime videos, you know, the ones. And people are like, no, you have to see it in person. Like, that's the experience you need to have. But it's very elitist because who the fuck has the money to go see it in person?
Yeah, like Broadway's
very
happening
few.
in one place and it's very expensive. And it is kind of a similar argument, right?
Yeah, and I don't think, like, people are gonna, it's like, yes, you should see it in person. It's a very different experience. But so are music concerts, right? But I can still boot up the albums I like and listen to them whenever I want. But going to the concert is going to be a different special experience. I think musicals are the exact same. And I think digital maps or books are going to be the same as well. Like, you can look at the map, but if you actually want to like study the map, then you have to go see the map.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and to continue that parallel, like Chicago is one of the longest running musicals on Broadway, and guess what? There's a Chicago movie and no one stopped going to see Chicago. So it's kind of the same thing of like, sure, we can digitize this thing, but there's still a need to have that thing around, especially for the people who are studying that thing.
Right. That was so much tech conversation.
we can keep on going.
Okay. So all the tech stuff aside, like, you had some issues with it. I think we're both kind of in gray areas in regards to how to deal with it, though. Me coming from like the more art side, I guess, you from the tech side, it's all chill with us. But obviously something's going on with that company. It's not being slick right now. Something's up.
Yeah, they certainly didn't drop it by accident, right?
Yeah. And then we kind of get into Nell's research about what's going on, which she does in one morning. Crazy, but she does it. She calls some other libraries. Oh, we forgot to mention. Okay. You know this, though, listener. The general drafting gas station map we have, because that's the company that did it. The other, like, 200 of them that were at libraries are either, like, missing or damaged or stolen. So something's up. Nell calls some of those libraries, I guess, to ask about what's going on. And, I mean, she doesn't really get that much information. If I'm remembering correctly.
I mean, she does get confirmation that some of them were straight up, like, robbed. You know, they're like, I don't know how it happened, and there's something really spooky about it, but yeah, it's like someone targeted this thing. Yeah.
So, yeah, for the most part, though, it flies under the radar, because it is just a gas station map, but Whispers better than I do remember that apparently there was like a video, like one of the ladies who was, I guess, old enough to remember it happening. I think that's the case. Like, on the video, the person disappeared, something to that effect.
I kind of forgot about that. I mean, that makes sense with the context we have now, that person probably did kind of disappear.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that happened when Felix looked over the security footage, because he does that. The person also, there's no entrance, no exit. They just are in the room looking around very casually, and then they disappear. So
I wonder where, like, they go to, though. Like, even if, like, for example, if we take, like, the library room, right? Where they are presumably disappearing to at the end of this section. It's only, like, a little room on the side of the wall, right? Like, it's not a much of a thing. And so even if, like, the person who robs the library first went into that room, like, where do they go from there? Like, don't they have to leave? Like, I'm confused about what's on the other side of the portal, I guess.
Right, it is a weird situation, unless they're accessing, like, another map that shows, like, another exit.
Yeah, and I guess like we do see at the end, it seems like someone does come out of that room, right?
Right,
Kind
so
of
they have to get
appears
in
and
somehow.
yeah. So I guess there must be some sort of interconnectedness to the other side of the portal.
Yeah, because I think it was just a closed room. I wonder if I
Right.
can find it. Oh, I guess the room we're talking about is basically not the gas station map. There's another map which is given to Nell by Ramona. She mentions that Daniel had contacted her because he wanted like insurance, specifically
Mm-hmm.
that word's used. And then we get a map that's from the Sanborn Insurance Company, basically an insurance map of the library, because they have to figure out like how they're going to like insure and like what the cost is going to be for this building, that kind of stuff. Oh wait, I have it. Let me see that little room though. Where's the trap room?
It's kind of on like the bottom of the map, bottom right of the map, if I remember correctly.
Bottom right. Oh, they have a little highlight circle. That is weird.
I kind of assume when they go into the room, it like disappears
Yeah.
because then no one's looking for it anymore.
Also, it's apparently in his office. Oh, in Daniel's
Dr.
office.
Young's. I didn't get the sense that I was very much imagining open office, I guess. Like, I imagine they were all kind of just in one big room, and this is like on the corner of it.
Nah, it looks like it's like. Oh yeah, you did audiobooks, so you wouldn't have seen them.
I did peek at the maps. I did have the paperwork with me, so I peeked at the maps when they were relevant.
Yeah, I don't really know. Unless like because the wall's connected to what's apparently the reading room, maybe that wall disappears and they end up in the reading room, or they're able to access it that way. Maybe like maybe what's cut out has access from the that has access from the reading room, and then they can get rid of that, and they end up in the office, and the door they're exiting is the office door. Maybe that's what's happening. I feel like we can't read. I feel like this is explained.
I'm just like my spatial reasoning, despite being a percussionist, is like terrible. So I'm having trouble visualizing. This might be the sort of thing we need to just wait and figure out.
Yeah. Because, okay. They say the room was no bigger than a closet, but where the false room had been hidden on the page was a smooth wall in the main reading room. So it's connected to the main reading room in some capacity. And then the intentional error, quote unquote, it's in the very same office that Daniel Young was murdered. So his office. So it's kind of like a connection between those two rooms.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I said I had the magic unlock here. I don't. I'm an idiot. Some of it. Well, also, okay. There might be a fix for this, actually. If the magic works through hand-drawn maps, which I think it also does, I think it depends on the style you do it in. Because to get to Ramona's shop,
right,
Nell followed a map that was drawn on the back of the business card.
Right.
So it was in a realistic style, but it was still a drawn map, I guess from her father who had went there, because it's the only way to find the store, I guess, if you're following that map. So it doesn't have to be like a produced map. It can just be something you draw. So maybe whoever is using that room has their own drawn map, which is why they're able to use it in a way that might differ from the map that we see. But they got like the idea for the placement of it because of the actual map.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too with the Ramona thing, right? Like you can kind of, I figured that's kind of how these escapes were happening. Like the disappearing person was like, okay, this person like drew themselves a room to get out of there, you know?
Right. And same with Francis leaving later in Swan's house. Because why would he
wouldn't know anything about Swan's house, right? But he was able to get out, so
that's the insurance map. I think it's an insurance map, both because it's actually an insurance map, but also because I think Daniel planned to use it as a kind of like a safety room for himself. Like somewhere, somehow he could use it to escape, because I think he realized people were after him. I think that's the idea behind it, but I think it ended up being what caused his death, because I think somebody used it first to get into his office. I think that's the situation we're in.
Okay.
But that map, it's from Francis, but Francis borrowed it from Eve. Who are these characters, you may be asking? Well, Ramona, or Rami, tells us in her flashback chapter.
I have to say, I liked the shift. Like, I know we were talking about like things being too direct earlier, but this is a part where I was like, oh no, this is like storytelling. So like that felt different. It felt like this is what I want. And while it was direct, it was also like there was a lot to it, right? Like it was the full story. It wasn't like this is what happened and that's that. Even though she seems like that sort of character, she still told the whole story.
Yeah, I'm probably using this wrong, but the shift in perspective kind of felt a bit noir. At the very least, it did feel very much like these characters are being investigated, or like,
yeah, like these are the interviews,
crime scene type of situation. Yes.
Oh, I see it. I get why you're saying noir, right? Because it's like, yeah, like over candlelight, she's recounting the story of like, this isn't like that mysterious night, but it's got that vibe to it,
Yeah.
Back
so
in the beginning.
I thought they worked very well. For the audiobook, you had different narrator, right?
Yeah, this is like, so I pointed out to you towards the beginning of the book that the intro to the audiobook was like, this book is read by list of a ton of names. And then I like read or listened to like several chapters and it was all one voice until this chapter. So it turns out that the extra voices are for the other people who get named chapters. So that way, when they're telling their stories, it's in a different voice, which kind of implies that the main narrator's voice is just Nell's.
Right.
So I thought that was a cool feature. I'm not sure how much it really adds to it, other than they had to pay a lot more people to make this book, but it was cool. I mean, it was a cool feature.
It's fun, yeah. It's a fun thing. So we get that academic setting, and there were 7 people in this group. The formation of this group, immediately in my brain was like, oh, I kind of know what's going on here.
Because of the Tam and Wally thing?
No, wait, no. What do you mean?
Just as far as like Tam and Wally were like childhood best friends.
They were, yeah. I still don't know what you mean.
I thought that's what you were gonna get at. Just to say that like it seems like Wally is like who they're alluding to as the big bad in this story, which might have to do with some like unrequited love or something like that. And they kind of set that up here.
I was actually giving this book kind of, I don't want to say benefit of the doubt. I don't think they did anything wrong, but I didn't care enough to think like Wally was into Tam. I was like, maybe they're just besties and that's fine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, at first that's what I thought too, yeah.
Yeah, obviously that changes with the other flashback that happens. I more meant like the 7 in this formed group were going to be the cartographers.
Oh, see, I was way late to the game on that.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was like thinking this band of folks was going to like learn about the cartographers and like come to fight them or something,
Oh, yeah, that's a possibility too.
Yeah. That made a lot more sense. But... yeah, not fight, not fisticuffs per se, but be enemies, But this makes a lot more sense, of course.
Yeah. So we have Nell's mom, Tamara. We have Wally. We don't know Wally's actual name because I doubt it's Wally. It might be. We don't know his last name.
It's funny because all I can think about is how we don't know Bear's name, but we actually don't know Wally's real name either.
Nope.
Huh?
We get Ramona, her name, because she's the one narrating this, obviously. We don't get Francis's last name in this flashback, if I'm remembering correctly, but we get it pretty much soon after. We get Nell Young, which is Nell's father. We get Bear, and then we get Eve. We also don't get Eve's name in this flashback, which I think makes sense, because why would you completely introduce your friends in this story? Yeah. I don't think you need to.
Especially because they're not all like new. I don't know. I guess she's the new one in this story, right? Like she's like, I was like lost and alone, and Tam kind of like is the leader here.
Yes.
She's the one who brings everyone together. So I feel like from her, if we were to have her perspective, we might have seen the like, I met this person first and last name.
Right. You could argue like there's too many details in this, like a lot of things that probably didn't need to be there, but I actually think it's an interesting way to give like personality to these characters without them actually being there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hate to like do the all roads lead to Harry Potter, but it kind of gives like when we get information about the Marauders and it's like, oh, like there was like a full life that happened in the past before the one that we're reading about right now.
Mm-hmm. It's also a good way to use unreliable narrator.
That's true too. Yeah.
Right, because I think Ramona was if I remember correctly, she spoke so highly of Eve, and like Eve being the super cool like chick that joined them last, and then we get to Eve's like narration, and it's like not necessarily that she doesn't think she's cool, but she's so nervous
Right.
because of what she did, and like the vibes are way off. But you don't really like, that's not something that comes up when you're thinking about certain people or even just the past, because you're going to romanticize the past a little bit, I think.
That was a really cool part of this too, right? Though, is the perspective based on each character, right? They have totally different opinions or interpretations of what the vibe of the friend group was like. I think they all generally think that it was positive, but yeah, there's kind of like different levels of like anxiety about the group, and especially like the way they talk about Bear, who we also don't have a perspective of yet because we don't even know who he is really. But this kind of idea of like, you know, like Tam was like really comfortable with everyone and loved everyone, and we were always like, I don't know why Bear is like so hesitant and afraid of losing us and this, that, the other. There's a lot of like beat around the bush talk that like something seems a little off with Bear, but from different folks.
Yeah, from their perspective, it's like, oh, we had never been closer, like everything is fine. But it's so easy to be in a friend group that large and see kind of like couples forming.
Yeah.
And also be like the worst in your group, which I think is how Bear felt.
Yeah.
And kind of feel like, why am I here? Especially because they're working on what they call the Dreamer's Atlas, which is brought up in this flashback. And it's basically their like mega project of taking real maps and making them fantasy style, and then taking fantasy and making them like real.
Right.
Which I have some thoughts about that in regards to the magic that exists in this universe. But it's like a very big project, and everybody kind of has their part in it, like in a very specific way. So when you're kind of the one that doesn't have like a specific thing going on, I guess, yeah, it could be a little nerve-wracking.
I know, I feel like bad because Bear, I mean, they basically describe Bear as like poor and academically not up to par with the rest of the group, and yeah, I was like I feel for you, dude. You know, like my biggest concern for the potential direction of this book is that somehow, some way, Bear is the real big bad of the book. Somehow having to do with like the breakup of the friend group and the like sort of great anxiety he felt about a potential loss of friends. And I'm gonna really not like it if like the kid who is described as not as well off as the rest of them and like experiencing intense amounts of imposter syndrome ends up being the big bad.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the situation. We kind of just get the setup of that for Ramona's, like the group and what they're working on.
Yeah. She also like doesn't really want to describe them as friends, right? Like she's like, you guys were friends, and she was like, well, it was like different than that.
Oh, was she like that? That's weird.
I forget what the exact words was that she said, but she was kind of dodgy about like what the relationship was between her and Nell's parents.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I feel like all of them were dodgy to talk about this, except for Eve. Oddly,
Eve was
like
very open. Yeah,
she was so open to talk about it, and I was like, that's a little sus. That's a little suspect.
It seems like, based on what Frances said, though, maybe she knows less than everyone else.
It's possible. Yeah, she wasn't there.
That's why.
But I mean, Ramona wasn't there either.
Yeah, I don't know. I also just like, I thought that they kind of like, I don't know what Ramona's professional life was like, but it did feel like they did her a little bit dirty because everyone's like, she's so shady. Like, why would you talk to her? And like, while she did seem dodgy, she didn't seem dodgier than anyone else did about this situation. So I didn't really get the vibe that she was like bad, you know?
Yeah, I think it's just because she's like selling maps privately.
Yeah. It just seems like they all, it seems like it's easy to say that when you've like become like an academic in the field is all I'm saying.
Yeah. There's definitely like some elitism going on, which isn't surprising.
Yeah, shocking.
But yeah, okay, that's kind of the Ramona stuff, though. I don't think there's anything else to talk about.
I mean, unless we want to talk about the attempted return, like when Nell tries to go see her again, because she says that little thing on the way out, right? On the way out from there, she's like, "You can't find what's not there." And then like Nell's like, that was spooky, but like can't get her back, right? So, and I was like, my first thought was like, did she just like cast a spell? Like, what did she do? You know, like what just happened here? But I
Yeah.
certainly, when she decided she was going to go back, was like, her shop is not going to be there.
Yeah, it I knew the genre, so I was like, "Oh, okay, something that's what's happening here." But I feel like the first hint was the person who got into the map division and it seemingly didn't leave. But even that you could like explain away in some kind of Sherlock Holmes type of situation. This was really, I think, the biggest hint that something else was going on.
Right.
Like something weird was going on.
Which is like why it's crazy that Nell is like, I don't believe you, Francis. Like, magic, crazy, even though I literally watched Ramona's shop disappear before me, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Ramona, I guess, is basically out of the picture. I mean, good for her, because she probably would have fucking died.
Yeah. It is interesting that she seems to like use, I don't know, I guess one thing I'm excited to learn more about is why they are all so afraid of the map, and like this is such a dodgy situation, but they all use the ability that they know about so freely, like without fear, or maybe for fear in Francis's case. But like for Ramona, I'm like, it seems like you just do this just cause, like, just to be secretive. I don't know. Maybe it is to defend themselves.
Yeah, I think Eve mentions that map, and the gas station map in particular, feeling like cursed.
Mm-hmm.
Like she knew something was weird about it. So I guess it's possible it is really just that map. But the magic itself is fine.
Right.
And then we go to Eve C. Moore. We get her story, and she talks about the drive to basically where they're going to work on the Dreamer's Atlas, which, let me just tell you, sounds like a fucking artist's dream. Like, get me out of here. Get me to, like, this small town in upstate. Like, I'll take it.
Yeah, I was like a little confused because they seem to like imply that, not even imply it. Were they funded by the university to do this project?
I think they had funding from the university, yeah.
That struck me as so odd because they had their PhDs, right? Like they had graduated. Whose money?
Yeah, I think they started it as like their thesis.
Also, no one would approve this as a thesis. All I could think about this with some of these works is like no one would be able to do, like, oh, there's so many things that like just don't make sense. Like 3 students of cartography starting as freshmen and staying all the way through their PhDs at the same university where they effectively all work on the same projects. Absolutely not. That is just not how academia works. There's no way they would allow that.
The other option is they're just doing it for themselves, because I think 2 of them, I think Tam and Daniel, were gonna like teach over the summer, but then they didn't. And then somebody was gonna go to London to intern, and they didn't. So I don't really know the funding situation. Regardless,
just none of the
crazy
PhD situation even made sense to me, is what I'm saying too, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I won't get too much into the academia of it all, but it just wouldn't happen. This is the simple thing. It wouldn't happen. Also, like, I forgot to mention this earlier, but it is so obnoxious that they name themselves, like, give themselves a title. Like, that's so high school of them. And if I were, like, another student in the cartography or geology department with them at the same time, especially being a full adult, which is what PhD students are, full adults, I would hate it. I'd be like, get me out of here. Like, this is such a terrible culture if this is, like, the way things are.
Yeah, especially because, like, their symbol it's nothing. Their symbol is literally just a normal compass rose. Like,
yeah, it's like very
those
like,
are just
cocky.
Yeah, they're so.
Yeah, it just like, honestly, and the more I think about the comment I just made about them being adults, like the worse it feels. PhD students are like adults. I guess they had been students for so long. What's the difference?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, some people could say like the romanticism of it all, which fine.
I just don't think it's cute.
But yeah, I'm not really about it that much either. Secret societies, sure, but
right. But this is like, I don't know. Maybe this is effectively how a secret society comes to be, though, right? So I get that, but like I think about how when I was teaching, like the end of my second year, there was like a group chat we had amongst me and some teacher friends, and at an event that we went to, kind of like to celebrate the end of the year, I think it was, someone in our group gave a public shout out to the group
Oh no.
by the name of the group me chat we all shared.
Oh no.
And every one of us cringed. So we were like, oh, like that's, we're not a named, that is the group chat's name. We are not a named group though. We are simply friends. we're all adults here. So that's what that makes me think of. And I just, that was a very cringe moment for us all.
Yeah. It feels very like Losers Club.
Yeah.
But they're not children.
Exactly.
You know?
It's cute when they're 12, you know?
Yeah.
And also when they're like outcasts, you know, not like a bunch of presumably rich, you know, humanities PhD students who don't seem to have many worries unless they're bare. So
yeah. Okay, so Eve gives us like the beginnings of that trip and how they got the map, which was like a complete coincidence, which is very fun. And then we also get the information about the phantom settlements and like the trap rooms, and I know them better as paper towns. Because I've seen the movie, and I'm sorry if you read the book and you didn't like the movie. I haven't read the book. But John Green, wrote Paper Towns, if you didn't know. And that's also how I know what Aglow is.
Yeah, what's the connection here?
Okay, so Aglow is basically a paper town. It's like the most famous paper town that exists in America.
Can we define paper town also?
Okay, a paper town is like it's a phantom settlement, right? It's a fake place on a map that's used just to ensure copyright of the map maker.
Okay, so it's the same thing as what they are calling phantom settlement.
Yes, they're the exact same thing.
Okay. Wow, I'm going to have to read Paper Towns now.
I know, apparently. We'll all have to. So that's how I know Aglow. That's how I know what paper towns are, too. The fact that Nell doesn't know what a phantom settlement is, even though she deals with ancient maps, is crazy to me. I feel like that's like 101, like cartography.
I guess I wouldn't know better. I'm like very invested in this phantom settlements thing now. So, okay. Yeah. And then is Aglow is referred to also in Paper Towns?
Aglow is like the place the girl goes to.
Oh, this is probably what you just told me, isn't it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, I might not have. No. Aglow is, there's like a girl and then like a group, classic YA stuff. The girl disappears and leaves like these clues, and then the group, including a boy who had like a crush on the girl, whatever, he like finds the clues and like follows her and like figures out she was going to Aglow because she's like interested in paper towns, because she's like, paper towns, paper people, like none of it's real, blah blah blah. She does all this stuff. But Aglow isn't an actual place. They have like a sign up, I think.
Yeah, I actually just pulled up the Wikipedia article, and they have a sign there.
Yeah. Yes. So she wasn't saying actually in Aglow there's nowhere to stay. And that's the same for what kind of happens in this book. Like, Aglow isn't a place you can actually go. But clearly through magic, which we have in this book, it is, if you follow the map. Although we don't know that until we get to the Francis flashback.
Right.
But yeah, they get Aglow. The fact that they also don't know what Aglow is, if they're in cartography in New York,
now
and
that
it's
I'm
the
reading
most
about
famous.
This,
that's so strange to me.
That does seem like a bit of a stretch contextually. I think without having other contexts, it's fine, right? Like, I have no context, and it might just be like chalk it up to this being a parallel universe, right? But yeah, I wouldn't have noticed that myself. But yeah, with some context, I'm just reading through the Wikipedia article, and it's like, this is like popular culture. It's been around for a while. It was first seen in 1925 in this universe. So it seems well known.
Yeah, but neither Felix or Nell know what it is. They find it on the map, and they're like, oh my god, this place doesn't exist. And then we kind of get the situation with the phantom settlements, and I guess the next step of kind of what happens is the Irene death. Is that what happens? They're at the party, right?
Yeah, so I guess the next thing is really the party, yeah.
I guess we kind
dedication.
I guess we should kind of set up that they find Aglow, and Felix is like, okay, and that's that.
Yeah, he's kind of ready to like, we did it, we're done.
Yeah, he's kind of ready to pass it off. I mean, understandable, I guess, if people are literally dying over this map.
Yeah, here's my thing about Felix's point is he's kind of right in that Nell should not be doing this herself.
Right.
And like I understand where Nell's coming from, because who else? No one else can do what she's doing right now. Like if she gives up this case, it's totally dead, right? Like it's going to become a cold case for sure. So I understand why she feels the need to do this thing, but Felix is like totally on it. Like this is very, very risky. Like no reasonable person would be doing this stuff. And
Right.
it feels like it does, again, come a little bit from like Nell's need to like prove something or like get closure with her dad or like whatever it is that Nell's motivation is. It's very much selfish. It's not because of like some grand, like I want to solve the mystery because otherwise it won't be solved. It's like I want to solve the mystery because I want to know for me and like I want benefit from solving the mystery for myself. Which I get it, you know, it's her dad who died, but like it just, I understand why like Felix is pushing what he's pushing. I would probably be in that boat too.
Yeah, I mean, I think she very clearly states like her want to solve the mystery because her father couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had obviously been obsessing over it for some reason. I don't understand why he held on to this map so long. Like what the mystery is, I don't understand.
I mean, it's so whatever. I don't even know if it has to do with just the difficulty of the mystery so much as just the fact that his wife died from it, right? I think it's the emotional aspect more than the logical one.
Yeah, but then it's like, why was he working on something, quote unquote? Like, what was he working on with this map? Like, why was he holding on to it instead of just getting rid of it, especially if he knew it was a target? Like, what is, there has to be something in Aglo, right? There has to be something there.
Yeah.
And the question is, like, if there is something there and they know about it, why would the father not just go straight to Aglo to find it? Like, certain things just aren't making sense in my brain.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But regardless, Nell is like, okay, I'll give it up, whatever. Because her and Felix are kind of a thing now. So it's like, she's finally going to choose a person over a map. Because she's just like her father.
Dumb setup, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like where this part of the journey goes, where it's like, will she choose Felix or the map? And it's like, why are we personalizing? It's like,
yeah,
why is this becoming an affront because we've chosen to explore a map more? I don't know. I guess there's people dying, so that's why. But still, just I wasn't really on board when Felix comes around and is like, I like was testing you and you failed the tests. Like that's just kind of disrespectful.
Yeah, I think if you know she like prioritizes her career over her relationships, then you already knew that 7 years ago.
Yeah.
You should probably like talk about it before you decide to get together again, or like before you decide to like trust her.
Mm-hmm. And also, I kind of do think she genuinely did think she was done. Like, yeah. I think she after the fact is like, that was never going to happen because she knows herself. But I think she really did like try to like get up the gusto to be like, I'm going to see Irene and like literally give her the map and be done with this and just live my life the way I want to live my life. Like, I really do think that was her intention.
Yeah, it's just, I can understand why she would want to hold on to the map. Even just not for the sake of being better than her father. You also kind of know now that it involves your mother, right?
Right.
So, I don't know. And you know there's something about this map that you're probably one of the only people that will understand, like, what is going on with it.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I think that makes sense.
What do the police do with it? Like, it's not, she keeps saying it's going to be evidence, but it's like, it was in his desk, and sure, it was in a secret compartment, but like, does it have to do with his murder? Like, I
think she's right that they're gonna take it and like do nothing with it, though. I think that's totally
accurate. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like they're not gonna actually like look and analyze this map. They're gonna be like, okay, it's a map. Like, there's nothing about it. At most, they might get rid of it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think there's any realm in which the police look at that map and say, this is what we were looking for. Like, it's so disconnected from what happened. And what, they're gonna look at the cartographer symbol and be like, oh my god. No, they're gonna see a fucking compass rose because that's what they made their symbol. Like, it's nothing.
Yeah. I think it's just more of like, the concern I would have is she's taking things into her hands that like she seems to be giving herself authority without actually knowing that that's going to turn out to anything, right? It comes down to like, she is even lucky to have gotten as far as she did because there should have been nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the continued, like, I'm going to chase down this path till I find something even though like in any normal situation, there's a little chance, very tiny chance she would find something and she might die trying. So
yeah, and she's getting very lucky with the information she's being given.
yeah, she got very lucky with Eve. So
yeah, she does seek it out sometimes,
Mhm.
but in regards to like general drafting at the service, that conversation was
Right.
so lucky. And then seeing Eve and seeing Francis, both very lucky. Yeah, so basically this all comes down to she doesn't give up the map. She basically tells Irene she didn't figure it out, whatever her father was working on.
Irene also says something interesting in this scene. I think it was in this one where
Does
she's
she?
like, your father told me when
Yes!
he started that if something bad happened to me, assume foul play. And I'm like, why were you holding on to that information? This is another withheld, like unnecessarily withheld information from the author situation. I was like, why would this just be coming out? Like, why didn't this come out when he was dead in the middle of the library?
That's also like so long to have that belief.
Yes, that's crazy.
Oh, I didn't think about I knew that line was weird. I didn't think about the implications of it. Cuz it's like
Right, like
what
from
if
the
the
beginning, that was a concern.
what if the junk box was set and placed by the father?
Oh, it totally was. No, I thought
okay.
we were on the same page about that. My bad.
No,
it totally was there
I
for
didn't.
him. And the reason he threw a fit when
Oh.
it happened was not because she was right. Not, it was obviously not because it was junk, but it was like he put that there to hide it there. He put it in a thing called
Yeah.
junk box, thinking no one gives a crap about this thing because it says junk on it. And she happened to pull
Right.
it up and be like,
Oh,
"There's a thing
right.
in here," right? Like she figured him out. And that's what led to all this stuff. But he totally put it there, though. It was him safekeeping it. That's my theory, at least.
Yeah, I thought I similarly to certain people, I also thought it was just a random coincidence that it was there. And that's why the father freaked out so much. So, okay, that does make sense though that he would place it there to try and hide it,
Mhm.
like needle in the haystack type of situation.
Yeah. So that was accessible to him, but also not to other people.
Yes.
And it was
that
like
does
not
make
logged,
sense.
right, for a good reason. So
Right.
yeah,
That's okay.
it was a thought I had somewhat early on in the book of like, oh, maybe he put it there, but it wasn't until around here where I was like, oh, he definitely did that.
Right. Okay. So yeah, there must be something in Aglo that he's trying to keep safe or
That's a good
secret.
point too. I mean, yeah, maybe that's what it is. I really am having trouble like feeling strongly about what it is that's making this all so important and powerful. And
Yeah, so
one of my sort of qualms throughout the book has just been like not feeling like there's enough to grab onto. As far as the map portion, there's definitely plenty to grab onto in this story, but as far as the map specifically, like we start getting something to grab onto with the Phantom settlements, like that part, you're like, okay, I'm invested. But at least up until that point, I was very much like, I think the map might just not even matter. Like it might just be a dupe, like a fake. So, at this point, I feel like, okay, we know it's important for some reason, but I don't have enough to like feel like I can theorize super strong about it. I think there being something in Aglo is not bad. I think it just depends on how the magic works a bit too. Like if they're crossing over, say that the way it actually works is when they cross over into the portal, they cross to Aglo. Like then maybe there's something I could start theorizing about. But yeah, it's hard right now. It's a little vague.
Yeah. I mean, one of my thoughts was like, the mom apparently died in a fire, but what if that wasn't the case?
Like
And
what if there was
she
no
just-
fire?
Yeah, what if, well, I mean, there might still have been a fire. Also, the fact that there was a fire at General Drafting's, like, location in New Jersey, and then another fire at the place in New York
Oh,
was
that's
very interesting to me.
I didn't catch that. Yeah, because that probably implies the same source, right?
You would think. But, like, maybe it's possible the mom is still alive in Aglo for some reason. But
That's like an interesting
then
one
it's-
too.
then
I
it's
kind of
like,
briefly thought when they
why?
opens the door that like the figure that appears behind her might be her mom or something, but then the figure seems to knock her out, so it doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah. Because it's like, why would they keep her separate there? Like, what's the purpose of it?
Unless she chose that, or like they don't know that she's alive, like which then that doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore, I guess. But
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of things we still don't know. But Irene's never gonna know because she's fucking dead.
oh yeah, I was like, not Irene. Like I kind of wanted more info out of her, really. I was like, well, I want to know why you like fired them at his bequest. Like, I guess we know why, but I'm like, you seem like kind of flaky. Like, I want to know more about your feelings and thoughts on all of this situation.
Yeah. It she felt kind of like an interesting target, but I guess it was possible someone overheard her mentioning Dr. Young working on something.
Yeah. I
So
almost
maybe
like,
they thought she had more info.
I kind of thought her death made Francis a little more suspicious than before. Because
Mm.
he's fully aware that Nell and Irene were interacting, right?
Oh, yeah, he was also there when Felix came up.
Yeah, and he was like upset about that. So I was like, oh, like I don't think any of the other murders were Francis, but I think this one might be. I was like, oh, I'm like starting to think that maybe he's not totally separated from this.
Yeah. Also, yeah, interesting interesting point being brought up that Francis did want the map.
Yeah, that's true too.
I mean, he could say it's to keep Nell safe,
Right,
but
right.
we don't actually know that.
Mhm.
We don't know this man, you know?
Yeah, I guess that's hard to say because it seems like Francis was trying to help her dad with the message with the map he sends through Ramona.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like he was okay with like Daniel having the map.
But also, that means Francis had the map first.
That's probably true.
And Francis, we know, can recreate maps or create them entirely because he escaped Swan's office.
Mm,
So maybe he replicated the insurance map.
that's interesting. I mean, he probably did.
I mean, he had to.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess we just need to know more about Francis. I was really hoping to get more out of like the Francis section of this than we did.
Yeah, the Francis section was basically just the confirmation of magic.
Yeah, I had like no notes after I read that one because it was just kind of
I
confirmation.
didn't either.
Which is a shame. It was just a lot of build up. I feel like Francis has a lot of information that we don't know still.
Yeah, because he's also seems to be like the only one still in contact with almost everyone.
Right.
Because he gets the map from Eve, he gives it to Ramona to give to Daniel.
That's a good point.
So, I mean, I will say I was also slightly suspect of Eve because of the map room, because she has the map back. I thought the timing of that was interesting because somebody
like, she
obviously
got the map and then something immediately happens at the library.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting coincidence.
That's a good point. I wouldn't have suspected her at all.
No.
She seems least likely, but you always got to be suspicious of that too. So
yeah, because also I wonder if Daniel and Eve didn't get along, because why would Daniel go to Francis if Francis was just going to go to Eve?
Maybe he didn't know Eve had it.
Yeah, but I feel like it was mentioned that Eve's particular like map collection involved that map. Like she was looking into those maps specifically at Princeton or something. So, very interesting. Maybe it is just the case that Daniel was more familiar with Francis, so he asked Francis.
Maybe. Or maybe it just had to do something with like the safe transfer of it.
Yeah, maybe. Something to think about. There was an argument between Nell and Felix. I have nothing to say. They should not be together.
It's dumb. It reminded me. I was like, I had already been kind of getting the feeling that Felix had some qualities of Nell's dad. And this just like kind of like set it in motion. And I'm like, oh, you guys got into a shouting match in the library? How original, And just like the kind of personal attacks in this really just sent me through. I'm like, you guys would be in a very toxic relationship. Like, I don't want this.
Yeah. I mean, also the insults they threw at each other were so superficial and basic.
And also, like,
is
I
this
was
a high
upset
school
with
breakup?
Nell. Right. I was upset with Nell too, though, because Nell's like Loki, like riling him up, right? And like trying to upset him, and then he's like, well, now I'm going to say something equally upsetting to you, and she's like, I'm a victim. Like,
I know, that bothered me so much.
Upset.
And he's
I
the one
really
that
thought
apologized.
She didn't care. Like, I actually thought she had reached a point where she didn't care that she worked at Classic, and it wasn't like up to her really, right? So I thought she was like whatever about it, and she was like warming up to it a little bit. And then Felix makes his comment, and she's like, I have a sad life, and Felix is mean. I wasn't, and it just felt like it was supposed to maybe be even like a culmination between the like tech science versus art side, right? And like, I didn't like the way that built up to like break in the way it did. It didn't feel productive. So
yeah, it just felt like a building of conflict for the sake of building conflict.
Yeah, and like I don't want this to like get fixed personally.
Yeah. We don't have to say anything else about that. Okay. So theory wise, We kind of talked about how we think the magic's gonna work. We kind of established we don't really know why Aglo is important, though. But I guess we'll figure that out in part 3. We do have some thoughts. I think we basically have the same thoughts about what might be going on here, though. Felix's boss is named William Haberson. I saw William, who was very science-oriented. I saw Wally, who was very science-oriented. And I thought, maybe. And I think you had a similar thought.
Yeah. I also thought, it wasn't my first thought, though. I want to be clear. That my first thought was that it was Bear. That Bear was William Haberson, and it's because of like some things I referred to before. Where I was like, I feel like they're like othering Bear and like putting him on the outside, and that's giving like kind of villain origin story vibes. So I will say that Wally seems like the much more reasonable and much more likely answer. But in the name of like trying to gamble for the right theory, I'm gonna put my money behind Bear. I would like to think that it's not going to be as simple and straightforward as William being Wally. I don't know if that is simple and straightforward or if we're just like reading it well, but I would like to push it one step beyond and say like Bear being the kind of outcasted, like afraid of things falling apart type is the one who kind of like experiences kind of an extreme reaction to Tam's death, and that might be what is leading to this kind of crazy behavior now.
Yeah, I'll say I started with the Wally thought. But I guess I went in the opposite direction of you. I thought the William Wally thing first, and then I was like, actually, maybe that's too simple. I mean, Occam's razor, whatever.
Right. This
but
is literature, though.
Yeah, I was like, we haven't gotten anything about Bear yet. Like, what if Haberson is Bear? And Wally being established as this villain... Right. Wally being established as like this villain, because I think even Nell is starting to see him as like the one that's after them, right?
Yeah, I mean they've named it a couple times of like Wally is watching me and like Wally's doing this. So.
Yeah. And I'm like, what if Wally is just like the red herring? Like,
it's a little too soon to have the answer, right?
Yeah, I think my idea of who Humphrey is and who William is could swap.
Oh, like, interesting.
William could be Wally, and Humphrey, I think, very possibly could be Bear, because Bear was kind of described as like the mom friend of the group. He was like the mama bear with her cubs, I think is what Ramona says. So I was like, maybe Humphrey, who took in Nell and took care of her, maybe that's Bear. Also because Humphrey is like on the outskirts of cartography, which I think kind of fits with what Bear was doing.
Yeah.
And also his name, Humphrey means like peaceful warrior, but like the Humphrey like hum part can be Hun, which can mean bear cub. So part of his name can also mean be like allude to Bear. But the opposite of that is if it's not as simple as we think it is. What if Bear is William and then Wally is Humphrey?
That I have to say that Humphrey being any of the cartographers seems impossible to me.
Oh, okay. Let me change your mind.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Well, can I say why? Can I add a?
Oh yeah.
Just in particular, Humphrey shows up to the funeral and seems kind of like happy-go-lucky and like doesn't really have anything special going on, as far as being there, other than Nell not wanting him to be. I would think that there would have been some like side eyes or something described if we needed to be paying attention to Humphrey at all. And he seemed pretty unfazed by the whole situation. So that was like the main thing.
Yeah, I will say if Francis and Humphrey were there at the same time is a bit of a snag. But I think if Humphrey is a Wally and like Tam's death changed the trajectory of his life, and he stopped caring so much about the exactness of maps and kind of fell into classic, then him, like, not caring about Daniel makes sense. Because I don't think he ever really cared about Daniel. Especially after knowing Daniel, like, screwed his daughter's career and they haven't been talking for 7 years.
Maybe.
I wouldn't give a shit about him either, like, to be honest.
Yeah. They do mention that even though, like, Wally seemed to have a thing for Tam, that he still did care for Daniel. Like, I think Eve says that they were like brothers, like.
Right, but does that change if Daniel had something to do with the fire?
Yeah, maybe.
Because who ends up with the map? Who ends up with it?
Well, who does end up with the map? Now I'm like confused.
Daniel ends up with the map.
Right. Well, does he end up with it first?
Hides it in the. He probably. Let's assume yes,
Okay.
he does. And he has something to do with the fire, and he has something to do with Tam's death. And then the cartographers break up, because, like, none of them have seen Nell in years.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe Humphrey sticks close enough to keep an eye. And then you hear that Daniel has gotten his daughter fired, Tam's child fired from this very important place in the library. She's blacklisted, banished from cartography. So you take her in.
Right. He's the only one who gives
and
her
you
a
become
job.
a sort of father, like uncle figure, you know. You take care of her, she takes care of you. You're like, you know, holding on to each other.
But I feel like he would express more understanding of Nell's situation if this were the case. Like, he forces her to take bereavement leave, you know?
That's true, but he might also just understand, like, the dedication to the work. Because Nell describes herself as being very much like her father and how stubborn they are.
Right.
So maybe that's just an understanding. You know, I'm like stretching this to make my theory fit, but we'll figure it. I also think Humphrey needs to be more than just some secondary character, although I guess Swan is, so maybe he could be. But he says something weird before the party at the library.
Oh, please share.
Before Nell leaves, she's like all excited because, you know, Felix is going to be there.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
And
go ahead.
She's like dressed up, and he talks to her briefly, and before she leaves, he says, "Be careful."
Right.
And Nell thinks that's weird, but he kind of shrugs it off like, "Oh, I have sisters, you know, just something you say, be careful." But then something happens to Irene, and then Nell gets knocked out. Like, it's very weird timing, and it makes me think if all the cartographers are working together to somehow get the map, or at least some of them are, like Francis and maybe Humphrey, whoever he is, Bear or Wally, maybe he wants the map, but he doesn't want to hurt Nell for it.
You know, I really didn't think. So when I read that scene, I kind of thought it was like he's leaning into like Nell is super anxious, right? And then he even says it's like you're going on a date, right? And so I'm like, okay, yeah. And Nell's like super anxious, like and also she should be, right? Like she should be nervous. Like the phrase "be careful" should make her think about the potential for murder, and it does kind of serve as the like the crow's call, you know, for what's gonna come. But I really didn't think about it as he knows something more. But that's a really good point, to think he would know something more, and he's not just a bystander, but he's actually in the background involved. I don't know if I believe that he's one of the cartographers from that, but I could believe he knows more than he's letting on to.
Right. I mean, you could also just pass it off as people have died in that library. He's saying be careful.
Yeah. I think that's the
Very
thing, is
typical.
it seems very reasonable for him to say be careful.
Yeah, I think the weirdness came when Nell thought it was weird.
Right.
Like, she kind of made a deal out of it.
It kind of was like, ooh, that felt targeted, you know?
Yeah, and I was like, this is also now hitting me, that maybe this is something going on. So yeah, he could be Bear, or he could be Wally. I think it's more likely he's Bear.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah, I would
boy,
say, like,
would it be interesting.
William could either be Wally or Bear, but if Humphrey's anyone, he's Bear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, most of the theories I think we established beforehand and while we were talking is kind of like everybody's kind of suspect. I guess Ramona's not. I don't have any reason.
Yeah,
for
somehow
her.
Ramona's like the least shady character.
Yeah.
Despite all of the hype. That's another case where I was feeling things were over dramatic, like too much, you know.
Yeah, and then we still don't know what's going on with Aglo.
I'm still
We'll figure it out.
As far as like the map, like part of me does believe that there's a possibility for it not to be so connected as we think it might be, like for there to be some third party big bad. I think that's still a potential mission, right? Because we kind of see like the ascribing of the cartographers in like the early part of the book is like, oh, they're going to come for you, but it's really like potentially one of them, you know? And so I think that given that it could only potentially be one of them, it could also just be none of them. And there's something else that we have yet to learn in the first half of the book. You know, it wasn't present in the first half of the book.
Yes.
That's not a cartographer.
I mean, it's possible. I feel like it would be too out of left field at this point, I feel like.
I don't know. I feel like it happens, right? It's like we get these stories where it's like, oh, like this person's bad, but actually, like, okay, like not to have all roads lead to the 39 clues, but like this kind of happens in the 39 clues where like you spend the whole like first 10 books, you know, the first series of the many series that series becomes, being like, oh, like these are like your set of bad guys and like we are the good guys. And you kind of find out at the end of it that they're also like the same group as the bad guys, and they're actually all fighting this other totally different family that's like really the bad guys, you know. Like I'm kind of thinking of one of those situations where like there's infighting basically.
Yeah, I had an idea. I don't think it would work with the ages though, because I'm trying to think of characters that are mentioned that we don't know about yet. I mean, we've heard whispers that like Swan's the bad guy. I don't think that's true.
That seems super unlikely to me. I'm glad to be surprised by that, but that's one theory
yeah,
I won't make.
I think I would be interested if their cartography professor was anything, but I don't know how old he was when he was teaching.
Now that you've said that, he's my first vote for potential third party big bad.
I feel like the age might mess up that theory though.
It's only been like 20 years, right? I guess it's been more. She's like 30.
Nell's
something.
like 35 or something. Yeah,
I guess it's been some time. He'd be a pretty old dude, is my assumption.
So he'd be like 70s, 80s
at least.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty impressive. All right, never mind. Knock that one down.
Yeah.
I don't think he's the one.
Yeah, I just don't know. I guess it could be the board members, but I feel like they're not important enough
we would have
for it to be
more.
the board members. So I feel like the only option is the cartographers. I feel like for a solo book like this, it has to be someone in the cartographers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe if it was going to branch out into something bigger like the 39 Clues did, then we'd see something else bigger.
Yeah, or it could be multiple. It could be a lot of them.
That's true.
Which I think we've thought about.
That feels like a video game now.
Yeah, we just don't know why, really. I think, we're going to need to know what happened that summer, I think, to figure it out.
I'm trying to think if I have any other like concrete. Oh, my other concrete prediction is that Nell is never going to work at the library.
Yeah, I think this ties into one of my like thematic ideas of what's going to happen. But speak more if you have more than just that sentence.
Well, just to say that and it was kind of leaning that way. I made this prediction before the last chapter, just to be clear, but like it was kind of starting to lean that way of like, I'm not going to tell Irene, or I'm not going to give Irene the map just to get a job. And I think she's starting to like drift away from like, I don't think the motivation really is the job, right? Otherwise she would have done that. But I also think she's going to be over it. Like, I think she's going to be like, she's either going to realize like, oh, they only want me for my name, or realize that she doesn't need that job to be happy, or like even necessarily the field of cartography to be happy. So I think it's going to be this sort of like, I dreamed all my life that I was going to do this thing, and then like I kind of like came back to earth. And she's going to be like, she's going to choose not to work at the library. I think that maybe she'll get offered to work at the library by whoever takes Irene's place, and she'll say, no, I'm good. And kind of like find her own path instead of her father's path. Yeah,
I mean, she definitely has a lot to work with the magic aspect in regards to what she could do. Mm-hmm. Like, I wonder, Ramona seems to use it so freely. If that's how she deals with her business, that would be very interesting.
What if yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we had some kind of like Ramona coming back into it and kind of taking Nell.
Oh, that's good actually. Like Nell works with Ramona.
Right.
That'd be pretty cool actually. They all seem to love Nell, is the thing. Except for like Francis, he doesn't really actually seem to love her. He's just doing what he thinks is his job. But like Eve and Ramona both seem to like have a really big soft spot, and it seems like they all really did love her when she was born. So I could see that. My follow-up to that was gonna be like, what if when you kind of cross into these phantom settlements, you do cross over like into the Aglo world, and like Ramona actually just lives in Aglo.
Oh, interesting.
And she just kind of like brings her shop into New York City via the map.
Yeah, because you're technically bending space, so it's like, how much can you bend in a drawn map?
Right.
The idea of Nell not working at the library, I think, connects to how I think the book is going to go thematically. Swan brings up something, or basically Swan asks what the purpose of a map is. And it's something her father used to ask her. And the purpose of a map is to bring people together.
Right.
That's what's established very early on in the book.
I can already see the connection there.
Yeah. And I think Nell, like her father, cares so much about her job and like her standing in academia, which is fine. It's good to be career focused, but the issue becomes when that's your entire life. And if you listen to this podcast a lot, you'll probably hear me go on about things similar to this, but work shouldn't be your entire life. It shouldn't be entirely who you are. The things that make people and make their lives they're good is the people you have in your life. And Nell is trying to do this alone. And she's working on a map that'll bring people together. But she's trying to do this alone, and she's trying to get her place back so she can do the job she wants to do. But to do that, she has pushed people away, and she's continuing to push people away, which is exactly what her father did. And it got him killed. It seemingly got him killed.
That's a good point.
And I think the thematic journey for her is to realize the people matter more than the work.
Yeah, that makes sense with the Felix storyline too.
Yeah. And I think it even makes sense for like the Swan storyline and her getting this job, but maybe the New York Public Library isn't the place for you. Or maybe it is. Maybe she does take the job, and because it's kind of seen as like a second home to her, but she also realizes like she needs to not just live there, right? Or she does what you think, which I think is the more likely, in which she's made this work her entire life since she was a child, so she needs to go and find her life somewhere else.
I have another thought with this conversation of bringing people together. Do you think that sort of the long-term goal is that the living cartographers are going to be brought back together in like a friendly manner, like that they'll start to talk again?
Ooh, it's possible. She's asking all of them for help.
Right, like they're all involved. She's kind of getting people together just with her. I just wonder if she'll connect them with each other.
Yeah, and Tam, it's not necessarily an interesting bit, but she very much was like, Nell is going to be a cartographer just like us. And she didn't mean that in the job space. I mean, she did, but she also meant it in this girl is going to be a part of our group.
She'll be one of us, yeah.
And if Tam was the one to bring them all together, I think it would make sense for Nell to do the same in this capacity.
Oh, I like that. Be a little bit more like her mom, not just like her dad.
Yes. If you have Francis who's there, not necessarily because he wants to be there, but he happens to be in the map division at the end. So he's involved. And then if you have Ramona Ramona and Eve who care emotionally about what happens to Nell. So maybe they show up again to help with whatever's going on. Like, we already have some of them coming together. And if Humphrey is indeed Bear, then we have somebody else. So all roads point to Aglo, I think, at this point. It's very clearly where they're ending up if we get all the cartographers back together.
Right.
So yeah, that was one of my ideas for thematically what's going to happen in the book. We kind of expanded on it. Mine was basically just like, she needs to get her act together. But the cartographers coming back, technically they would all be there. Because Nell is her mom and her dad. It would be all of them.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting idea.
That's interesting, yeah. Like she would represent them both.
Yeah. And then...
Wait, can I go back for a second before we go on?
Oh, yeah.
What if it's not just Nell that becomes one of them? But I mean, I do foresee that Felix and Nell are going to get back together. So what if it's like Felix is also one of them? Like he also goes to Aglo with them and like he becomes a cartographer.
Yeah, I mean, it would complete the number. Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting if Wally ends up leaving the cartographers and Felix as like the science exec kind of replaces him.
That's interesting. I think that could work too.
Anyway, that's what we think is going to happen. All of those things, all of the above.
Yeah. I'm putting my strongest push behind William Haverson being Bear. That is the one I want to die on.
I'm going to say they're going to make it obvious and have it be Wally. I think what we're not thinking about is, yes, Nell is saying Wally's the villain, but also Nell doesn't know who the fuck William is.
That's true. That's a good point.
They have not met.
The connections have not been made.
Right, so Felix is going to be there, see his boss, and then it's going to get revealed that it's Wally, and it's going to be like, holy shit.
Do you think William would act in person? Do you think like with his like clearly like multi-million-dollar company at least, that he wouldn't like have like some cronies to send out.
I mean, for the map, I think he'd go in person.
I think it's part of why he doesn't ever want to be seen.
Yeah. So yeah, I think William is just gonna be Wally, and I think Humphrey is Bear. Also, Humphrey sounds like such a bear name.
I mean, it does. It does. It gives the
Comfy,
vibe.
cozy.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, I think that's it, right?
Yeah. So we'll obviously finish up this book in the next episode, the next part. Woohoo! We'll see who's right, who's wrong. If we're both wrong. Possible.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the highest likelihood typically is that we're both wrong, but
yeah. Hopefully the book keeps going. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. I love a mystery.
Yeah, me too.
So
it was a good choice for sure.
And then next episode we'll also mention what we'll be reading next and like the range on that. But if you have your own ideas that are not spoilers,
theories and such,
don't ruin the fun. We have our Twitter 5050_books. We'll post about basically everything. We won't spoil either. We'll try not to. Fingers crossed. We'll also post like what we're planning to read, ranges, episodes coming out, blah blah blah. All of that usual stuff you see when people use Twitter as a business. So yeah, hit us up there. I don't think there's anything else though in regards to this.
I think we hit everything.
All right, good time. Oh, also like yell at us in a very nice, polite way if we missed anything. I guess this ties into your own theories, but we're just two people with some occasional whispers reading through books. We miss details, even though we take notes.
And talk for a long time about this. I'm sure we'll miss important things, though.
Yeah, one of us is listening to an audiobook on 1.2 speed. While they commute. Yes. So,
it's gonna
sometimes
happen.
we miss stuff.
I do really have to like go back and listen to things again because of that. Or like I'll like pull out the book when I like arrive at my location and be like, let me check this thing.
Yeah. So, if we get stuff wrong, if you have your own ideas based on certain stuff, put it all down there. We'll look through it. And I think that's it. Yes? Yeah. Okay, awesome. See you next time, I guess.
Bye.